In this episode of Your Moving Mind, I'm having a conversation with my Mexican friend and colleague, Candia Raquel. Candia has been working in living movement all her life. She has a very special angle in her work. She defines herself as a sensualist, and she teaches us how to use our awareness to our perceptions to connect with pleasure. This was a fascinating conversation. I think we could all use the reminder to take the time and reconnect with the fundamentals, the input we get constantly from the world around us through our senses. In the episode comments, you'll find ways to follow and connect with Candia Raquel. These days, she's offering her wonderful course, Pelvic Floor Awakening. Take a look. It may be just what you're looking for. You're listening to Your Moving Mind, the meeting point of movement and mindfulness, and everything in between. Move your mind, mind your movement, with your host, Michael Landau. Before diving into today's episode, let me tell you about mindful movement every day. I've recently created a 5-day course that takes you through the process I developed in the last few years. This course, Mindful Movement Every Day, is so far completely free. It leads you through 5 daily movement sessions. You slow down, you pay attention, you explore yourself for a few minutes, and you improve. Mindful Movement Every Day doesn't only give you 5 days of mindful movement, it teaches you how to keep doing it for a short moment every day. I don't know how long it will stay free of charge, so don't wait too long. Go to persistent-growth.com and sign up. Start moving mindfully today, and you'll never want to stop doing it. persistent-growth.com. And I'll see you in mindful movement every day. So, Candia Raquel, my special guest for today, thank you for being here with me, joining me. I've been on your podcast a little while ago, and we talked about my special angle on our mutual field. You have a very interesting and curious focus, shall we say. You define yourself as a sensualist.
Yeah.
And you use sensuality as a central concept, idea, teaching area. And our field is in movement and you have lots of movement backgrounds from different angles. Can you explain sensuality? What do you mean by it? Let's start with that. What is sensuality for you?
That's a great question. So, sensuality refers simply to sense pleasure through your senses and express that pleasure through movement in such a way that is completely free from inhibition and full of self-expression. So, this can be like savoring something delicious, or like the heightened expansive sensation of a fragrance, or listening to piano at a concert, or sensing the brushing of your clothes against your skin and the contact of your chair in the back with your sense of touch, or being delighted by your super high definition screen. And these are our basic senses, and oftentimes we take them and our experience of pleasure for granted. So sensuality is about becoming aware of the pleasure that is already there in you, and that especially can be interpreted as health. So well-being feels good. Being healthy feels good. And that's actually the baseline of existence, of life. So life itself has a quality of pleasure that is actually so normal, so habitual, that we can even become numb to it. We can become numb to pleasure, and we only remember that we have a body when something hurts through pain. So my take of sensuality is about rescuing this sense of self through pleasure. And of course, this sensuality, this state of embodying pleasure, is fundamental, in my view, for sexuality. But sensuality and sexuality are different things.
Yeah, we tend to think of them as one thing, and kind of a part of our culture is that we think of sensuality as being sexy, as
Yes, yes,
how you show yourself, not how you sense yourself. It's more about
exactly.
that, right?
Exactly, about how you show yourself rather than how you sense yourself. And this is very interesting because even though, in my view, sensuality and sexuality are separate things, in the sense that breastfeeding is a sensual experience both for the mother and for the baby sucking the nipple. Like you see the baby like rushing in the light feeding, and the mom is like in a loving connection, and there's like this fleshly pleasurable embodiment. And eating is essential, resting is essential. There's pleasure to it. And I believe that definitely sexuality should be a sensual experience, meaning sex should be pleasurable, which is most of the time for men, but not for women along history. Actually, for women, it's even said in this great platform that is called OMG Yes, oh my God, yes. They have a quote that impacted me that said, during intimate intercourse, men have orgasms and women have babies. And this is because, for example, during intercourse, like just like typical, if there's not an extra something to feminine pleasure, like the woman won't get any orgasm. And this is embedded in our culture as a whole. Like, I'm getting a little bit political here, but pleasure has been commodified. Pleasure has become a product, something you have to pay for, something that is transactional, something that you show, that when you address to it, you show it as something sexy to get something in return, like you want to get married or you want to get laid or whatever you want, or you want approval or validation or applause, rather than how you sense yourself. And the thing is that pleasure is so fundamental, and actually it's so accessible to us. It's just about becoming aware of our body, of our sensations. And I feel this is important for everyone as a person, as individuals, and also for everyone as a society. Because when we get like more in tune on the experience of pleasure rather than how we show, um, I feel that we are more authentic and also um, more in tune with nature, our own nature, and like the whole nature.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, you make a connection between sensuality and pleasure,
Yes,
and you are very much in the world, in my world, as I understand it, of awareness,
yes,
becoming aware of our senses, of what comes in through our senses, and use it for pleasure.
Yes.
This is something that we do in our sister methods. I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. You are a Bones for Life practitioner, which is kind of a sister or daughter method of Feldenkrais. And we use our awareness, and as you say, it is something that we can live without. And
Yes.
so many people, I mean, our senses receive information constantly. We're always in contact with the environment and with our own bodies, sensing things. And it can go completely into autopilot
Yes.
without our awareness. And you can live your whole life without really paying attention to it at all. So we're in the world of creating attention, using our attention, using the skill of awareness and improving that skill so that we can use our sensations.
Yes.
But I have a question for you.
Yes.
As I understand sensations, some of them are pleasurable and some of them are unpleasant, so it's kind of a spectrum.
Yes.
There are some things that I reject, that don't feel pleasurable. So if you use sensuality, you kind of, if I understand correctly, you're seeking that edge of the spectrum that is pleasurable.
Yes.
So how do you do it?
How do you, the question of the $1 million.
Yeah.
So I have a formula that is 3 keys to awaken sensuality, and you use those keys to unlock precisely the awareness of pleasure in the body. I mean, fleshly pleasure, because reading a book is an intellectual pleasure and so on. But sensuality is about flesh, about the senses that, like you said, can run on autopilot, and we become anesthetized. We become numb to our sensations, to the point that we don't sense neither pleasure nor pain, even though it's there. And I have the scar tissue to prove it. As a dancer, that I have endured so much pain dancing that I numb to pain in order to go on. And then I realized I was also numb to pleasure. Like, yeah, there was a pleasure of expressing, but it was more like searching for recognition rather than sharing in the stage the experience of my own pleasure. So something that happens when we begin to awaken to our sensations, to become aware, is that everything that has been bubbling beneath the surface comes forth. And sometimes you realize that your your shoulder has been chronically tense for your whole life, and then it's like, oh wow, I can move and relax my shoulder. So opening to awareness is like opening the Pandora's box. You are gonna sense what is there, both pleasure and pain. So that's why it's so important to create a safe container, meaning a context of safety, to gradually experience yourself. And for that, like, the best is to take classes, etc. But an easy and safe way to start is to use the 3 keys to unlock sensuality. And it's easy to remember them because they all start with a P, meaning the first one is pleasure, the second one is posture. No, the first one is posture, the second one is presence, and the third one is pleasure. So in a way, we begin with posture, that is the body, the skeletal structure of yourself. Then presence is your mental mindset aspect. And lastly, pleasure is about this subjective experience of delight. So to start with posture, it's very easy. Let's just check ourselves and notice if we are like resting in our true height or if we are collapsed like a caterpillar. And I've realized that I can easily live my life like this, collapse, like in the computer like this, in the sofa like this, eating like this, driving like this, walking like this, or maybe collapsed forward now, like puffing your chest off. Anyway, collapse is how you either shrink from your height or pretend a higher height. So to connect with your posture, just assume your true height. Just take a moment to sense how you're sitting or how you're standing. And remember, like last time I measured myself, I was 168 centimeters. I don't know how much it's in feet, but okay, 168 centimeters. And if I shrink 1 millimeter, try it, like be on your true height and then shrink just 1 millimeter, and you're gonna immediately sense how the breathing pathways get blocked. So now, like a sponge, like try to bloom on your true height. And now let's do the pretense, like the pretending to be more or taller than you are, and pull yourself up 1 millimeter and notice how again the breathing pathway change. So resting
Stop breathing immediately.
immediately, and it's just a measure of 1 millimeter that we find is sensuality, pleasure. So it's also something that leads you to presence, which is a mindset like, okay, I am daring to sincerely be in the world on my true height. Like I am not shrinking to not intimidate someone, and I am not pretending to be more and to be intimidating. Like I come forth as I am, starting with the experience of myself. And this sets the base to presence. Presence is being here now, and it pertains the state of awareness not of your physical base that you have already with posture, but of, let's say, the the mental realm of discourse. Like we are thinking all the time, and that's important. It's great that we're thinking all the time, and we don't want to silence that voice, but we don't want that aspect of ourselves to override the rest of ourselves, the posture or the pleasure. Like presence has to do with letting your mind think and wander and do whatever it wants, but still be here now. How you do that? Through the sensations. Okay, I am present in this place, in this time. I am not remembering something about the past, nor planning something about the future, nor having a mental conversation with someone that is not here. Presence means to be present in the present. And then you have like everything you need to experience pleasure. Like you have arrived.
Yeah, before you go to the third P, I want to give you my testimony.
Okay.
So we keep these these three P's clear. I could totally identify with this. One of my biggest aha moment during the Feldenkrais training 30 years ago was I remember this moment when I discovered that my chest is moving. You know, all of these joints that we have between the ribs and the breastbone, and between the ribs and the spine in the back. There are lots of joints. They are meant to move. They must move a little bit to when we breathe, but I lived my life until that moment and for many years with a rigid chest. It was my way of dealing with the world. I have theories about it, but the important experience was the when I applied what we do in the Feldenkrais method, what I did very intensively during the training, is exactly what you describe, presence. I call what I teach mindful movement, which is practically the same. You become mindful, you use that ability of our mind to focus and our ability to direct our focus to where we want it. We can use it or not use it, but we can do it. And it's a skill that we can improve. So you improve your presence, right? By improving that state of mindfulness that becomes better with practice. And at that moment in the training, and from then on, my the mobility of my chest, it started moving really much more than it did before. So it was crunching and making noises because it hasn't been moving for years. So from this idea of posture, how I was holding myself, probably more towards the making myself higher by having a rigid chest, by using mindfulness, by moving mindfully, doing all of these explorations that we do in the training in many different ways, something clicked and something changed. Probably didn't change in one moment, but there was a moment of discovery when it happened. And from then on, I move differently. This is the way I feel it. So presence, just being present with my sensations as I move, allowed me to change.
Yes.
And this, and it was very pleasurable. So now
And it
let's go
was
to
very, yeah,
the third P.
the third P, pleasure,
Yeah.
pleasurable. So actually, you summed it up very well. Like once you have the posture in place, meaning you're somehow grounded, and secondly, you have presence to the moment, to the here now, pleasure emerges naturally. Then you realize that, oh, this is pleasurable. So pleasure is about ownership and authority and discernment. Pleasure, becoming aware and welcoming pleasure is a matter of choice. It's up to you. You have to consent to experience pleasure in your flesh. It happens even if you don't, but if you're working like deliberately to with sensuality, it's important that you say like, okay, this feels good, and I'm gonna open to the experience and welcome the sensation. It's like stuffing yourself with the meals from Thanksgiving that everything is so delicious and you can be like all, swallowing like a boa, or you can say like, okay, this is really something. I'm gonna savor it. I'm gonna delight. I'm gonna let myself salivate and give into fleshly pleasure. So that's when it's very useful to to remember that once you open the Pandora's box, you're gonna find pleasure, but also pain and maybe memories and stuff from the past and yearnings from the future and all kinds of stuff. So this is about choosing pleasure, like using your inner pleasurometer. And also sometimes sometimes you find little pleasure and sometimes you find spectacular pleasure. So pleasure is about noticing what feels good. Pleasure always feels good and is good for you. So here's the caveat. Stuffing yourself with cake or pizza or alcohol or sensual touch or a concert can be an override to the senses. So, and it's not precisely good for health. Like I am one to be at the concerts next to the speaker that makes your skin vibrate because the sound is super loud, and I like that. I interpret that as excitement, but excitement is not the same as pleasure. And this is one of the biggest traps to especially intimate sexual pleasure. And it's in Moshe Feldenkrais's Body and Mature Behavior book in the chapter of, I don't remember the name of the chapter, but it's about habit and sexuality. And he points it out very clearly that something that can even create problems in the spine during orgasm is being overridden by the emotion of excitement rather than in the experience of pleasure, because emotions and sensations, let me repeat that, emotions and sensations are different stuff. Those are processed in different areas of the brain. Those are different cognitive domains. So yes, physical sensations can be accompanied by emotions of, say, love or excitement or whatever. But when it comes to pleasure, it's very important to always come back to the flesh, to the materialness of you, and not get carried away by your fantasy. So that's pleasure. In a way, it has a quality of relentless spirit, or like this braveness of the heart, that I am experiencing this because I so choose to. I am experiencing the pleasure in my flesh because I welcome it. So, yeah, to sum it up, that's it. Sensuality. Posture, because pleasure happens in the body as a sensation. So first P is posture. Second P is presence, which means to be present here now with your attention, regardless of your mental discourse, noise, etc. You let that happen. You let the world roll, but you come to the present. And lastly, pleasure as a fleshly experience, as a fleshly sensation rather than an emotion, and especially pleasure as a sensation that you welcome, that you motivate, and that you even elaborate on it with a quality of delicacy. Pleasure has a quality of supreme organization, of finesse, of five-course meal rather than McDonald's. Pleasure, to me, pleasure and sensual pleasure is elegant. And we see that as a quality of life itself, in the trees, in the jaguar moving, in you when you are naturally at your best.
I'm glad you went there because I was going to ask you exactly that, or going in the same direction. When you talk about delicacy, about it is a complex sensation and it is sensitive, which means that you to experience pleasure fully, you have to be sensitive. And what I sense in my own life and in our culture in general, and all of technology that we have so handy and near, the world around us has become very noisy. So that we have an overload of sensations. So I I'd like to ask your opinion, or how should we deal with this? I think that in order to feel pleasure and to be sensitive, we have to filter out a lot. We have to create a silent space in which we can open up the senses, because otherwise we just have to shut down because there's too much of it. So,
Yes.
so it's not so much about looking for the sensations that are so elusive and hard to find. They're hard to find because there's so much of it. So, so what's this? Well, I know we have a strategy in Feldenkrais. We slow down, we lower the muscle tone, which makes you more sensitive to smaller details. So
Yes.
how do you connect that to sensuality? It should work the
Great
same way,
question.
I imagine.
Great question. And I have an analogy and a very simple tool. So yes, definitely there's too much noise. Pleasure is like whispering a poem in the ears of your beloved and wanting your beloved to sense the steam of your breath in the neck when you are at the concert on the first line being pushed and pulled by all the multitude and
Mm.
next to the speaker. Like it's really hard. We are immersed in the era of the digital revolution that is highly technological and noisy. So as the analogy is that we have developed like calluses, like you see that in your feet you have like thicker skin, you make calluses normally, and as a dancer even more. So the area that you have callus is like scar tissue. You don't sense much because that's the goal of that tissue to protect you from over sensing, or to you have a thick skin to as a matter of protection, as a shield, as an armor. So it's very important to understand that also numbness is there for good reason. And it's like a suit of armor. And sometimes you don't know that you develop all that scar tissue to cope with past difficulties and trauma and whatever that we all have. So it's actually a bad idea to cut off the callus, because then you won't be able to walk without getting like I don't sore on your feet. So the the way to resensitize yourself, I believe, has to have the same refined and cared quality of pleasure. Like you don't want to cut the callus away or rip your thick skin off. You want to put cream on it and soften it so it becomes pliable and it can go to thick skin mode, and also you can go to skinless mode, because pleasure is quite skinless. It's like after few days of Feldenkrais training, or in my case, most for life, it's like, oh, I can sense the wind, and you really sense everything. You can easily get overstimulated. So for this, it's very important, first off, to have a safe context to experience pleasure and to know, like, okay, I am in the airport and there's only McDonald's. This is not the time for delight, and I have to be on the adrenaline mode. And there can be like other kind of worthy things in your realm of experience. But whenever you have the chance to sit and eat, do it as a pleasure practice. Whenever you can brush your teeth and calmly do the, I don't know, the mouthwash liquid thingy, take the time to experience that as a habit when you go for a walk. And the quick tool to come into your senses, even if you have a very thick skin, and even if you come from downtown that was noisy, and then you had a phone call and all that, I feel the most like easy tool to come back to your sensations is to close your eyes like that. Let's try it. Just close your eyes. And yes, there's like a shift in our awareness immediately. Okay, now let's open the eyes again.
Mm.
And yes, the sense of the sight is very pleasurable, but if we just close our eyes and close that sense, the rest of our senses are heightened, especially the kinesthetic sense, the sense of yourself, the proprioceptive sense that is not often talked a lot in our culture, but we work with it very much in somatic movement, in mindful movement. So our kinesthetic sense is the sense that you use to become aware of your points of support against the ground. So, for example, now you may be sitting, so you may sense one buttock more than the other, one feet standing a little bit different than the other, maybe your back resting on the headrest. And you also sense how you touch uh, everything, how you touch the keyboard or whatever. And the kinesthetic sense is heightened 60% when we close our eyes. According to Dwight Pargy, I listened him to say that for a few times. And why is that? This is because our sense of sight takes too much brain space. Well, not too much, takes a lot. Like we are really visually oriented creatures. Like that's our dominant sense. Even from a survival standpoint. So it's through our eyes that we also intake the most of the noise in our perception. So if you close your eyes, then you are like opening space in a great area of the real state of your brain for sensations to come in. So that's a quickie, and a more refined strategy is to take things slowly, as you mentioned, Mickey, according to the Weber-Fechner law that said that the the lesser the stimuli, the greater the perception of the stimuli. So if you push your face, you're not gonna sense much. But if you slide your nail against your cheek, you're gonna sense a lot. So it's a very small stimuli in a very small area and very slowly, which has like a heightened level of perception.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a great tip to to go into sensuality right away.
Yeah,
Close
close
your
the
eyes.
eyes.
And the important part of our work when we give a class. So we give instructions for movement, but I'm always very conscious of the huge part of calling people's attention in the class. Because just going through the movement, I mean, you go to the gym, you do your movements, you can do it completely mindlessly. It is not,
Yes.
you don't necessarily connect with your senses at all. You have to decide to do it. So part of our teachings, our shared teachings, is when we direct movement, we direct also the attention. So your combined tips is perfect. Just you can do it immediately, and what I found out is that it works very quickly. You close your eyes and you decide where you put your attention. And of
Yes.
course, even when you close your eyes and when you don't move, there is everything that you described. My connection with gravity, which parts are touching anything and are supported, how the support is divided and distributed. There is a lot of information. So you choose, and you can
You
just
choose.
stay still and move your attention around, and you have a huge source of information. And because you slow down and you are attentive, you are mindful, you can connect with that part of the spectrum that is pleasurable,
Yes,
right?
yes. There's maturity to pleasure, especially at this stage of life. Because when we were babies, we were like, pleasure is our birthright, and it is through pleasure that we learned to sit as it was through pleasure that we learned to eat as babies. If we didn't have that sense of pleasure and the delight that is to swallow, we wouldn't be alive. Like, pleasure is fundamental. Why else would you eat if it wasn't pleasurable? Just to stay alive, that's not no reason enough. We need the pleasure of life itself. And it was through this baby research that we learned to roll on our bellies, and that we learned to sit and to crawl and to walk. It was through this fleshly embodiment of ourselves. Like, and that's something that babies do without toys and without clothes in very poor countries. And that's something that babies of privilege do with the finest baby clothings and toys. Like, toys are unnecessary. The the experience of the pleasure of the flesh is enough to keep a baby entertained for over a year, as a means to learn how to be into the world, because no one had classes on how to sit, walk, or swallow or breathe. So we depend on on pleasure. And yeah, a long time we became schooled. I don't know how much it was for better and how much it was for worse, that we had spent so many hours sitting, and then we have all this cultural conditioning of how we should be and how we should show ourselves rather than sense ourselves, and etc. And I really believe that now, on this age, at an adult age, the difference between being an adult and a mature adult, to me, is pleasure. Like, the key of maturity is pleasure, because it takes choosing. And when you choose, you become responsible for your choices. And that's maturity. There are a lot of immature adults as presidents in the world that don't have this sense of self that is required to support the responsibility of choice. And pleasure is a choice. And that's why consent is a requirement of pleasure. And you said something that is very important to highlight, that is, yes, you close your eyes, and then you choose where to focus your attention, which means taking ownership of our own experience and becoming the authority of our own experience. And through that responsibility, I believe, comes liberation. And the liberation that is experienced through pleasure. That is, yes, I have this upbringing, I have this background, I live in this country in this apocalyptic era, but I I choose to have a choice because you always have a choice, but you have to choose to take ownership. It's something delivered, and then comes the delight that I am savoring this because I so choose to. No one can make you experience pleasure. It's you who choose to welcome the experience, and a great a great realm to experience pleasure and the means to it in a safe way is precisely mindful movement. That first maybe through classes, so you have a context of what does it feels to be with yourself, so then you can continue being relating to yourself in a positive and a kind and a gentle way every time you eat, every time you go on a walk, every time you shower. Like, why wouldn't have why wouldn't you have a great time taking a shower with you? It's you and you. So yeah, don't deny that pleasure to yourself, I'd say.
Yeah, this is a practice. Then our classes lead us to develop this, improve this kind of skill to actually be with your experience of the moment, pay attention, decide where you put your attention. And yeah, our nervous system is designed to seek pleasure. So if we just allow it, it will go there. But yeah, we have learned to ignore that impulse really from a very early age. Okay, this is a rabbit hole that I don't want to go into because we are a part of a revolution. This is what I feel.
Yes,
This approach is revolutionary. We have um, to develop that skill that has we've been robbed of it
yes,
in our culture. Our culture makes us numb. It teaches us to be numb. So okay, let's not go there this time. Maybe next time. But yeah, I totally see where you are taking it to. It's like going back to our nature.
yes,
We were
yes,
born with it. It is
yes.
there for us. It is available.
It's available.
And you have to we have to seek it because we've lost it
Yes,
during
yes,
our development in this civilization.
yeah.
Okay, so let's leave it at that. The revolution is silent, is not violent. So
And pleasurable.
and pleasurable. Always more and more pleasurable. So, Candia, where can people follow you, find you? What is it that you're offering the world so that if people want to keep hearing from you and working with you?
Yes, you can find me anywhere on the internet with my name, Candia Raquel or Candia Raquel. I am on Instagram, on TikTok mostly, and when you go to my website www.candiaraquel.com, which is www.candiaraquel.com, you can find the free guide to awaken sensuality that will be there for you, easy. And you can also get signed up to get the podcast that is the Sensual Sessions. Mickey has already been a special star guest for a couple of times, and yeah, if you want to know more, I am always accessible to inspire you to take the time to sense your fire so you can share your flame.
and find sensuality and pleasure.
Yes.
Great. I will put your links in the episode notes. So, Candia, thank you very much for your wisdom, for your teachings, and for your time. See you next time.
Thank you for having me, Mickey.